Mount X Expedition, Log 2. I have lost all account of time as I journeyed through the hidden cave. Along my way, I did notice, however, some cave paintings of some adventures of the miraculous people that seem to inhabit this mountain, who have inhabited this mountain. Well, the stories seemed simple, nothing too special that I could discern. They did provide an excellent means of context of what could have happened during this lost era of men, of supermen, of X-Men. As I exited the cave, I am instantly blinded by the bright glimmer of the sun. But once my eyes adjusted, I am greeted by a fantastical sight. High-rising peaks, beautiful colors, dynamic formations before me. I had not witnessed any of these before. This, dear reader, dear listener, is Claremont's Peak. Claremont's Peak is known for being a very long, sometimes dangerous journey. Several have died, several have faced many hardships up this peak. Hopefully, I'm to prevail and still have myself mostly intact once I reach the end of that journey. As I begin, I take my time to get to know my surroundings, just discussing and discovering all of the new sights that I see and unfold before me as I begin to make my way up this larger and larger sloping mountain. My peace did not last long, however, as I was quickly met by danger. The ground beneath me came alive. At first I thought I was going mad. Surely what I was seeing could not happen, but it seemed that the very ground itself wanted to devour me, to eat me. I did not question this much, and I immediately fled. I feared for my life, and I did not have the strength nor the courage to face whatever entity I saw head on. Behind me, as I was vastly, quickly climbing the mountain, making my way upwards to try to get away from the creature as quickly as possible. Some epic battle seemed to rage on. There was sounds and flashes of brilliant color, but I did not look back. I was too afraid. I merely wanted to get as farther away from the danger as possible. As I climbed and climbed, it seemed that danger had not yet finished with me, as there was a tremendous rock slide barreled toward me, and I was only on a small outhang of the mountain to gain some rest, and I had nowhere to go. Surely I was done for. But when I opened my eyes next, I was transported to safety, away from the creature, away from the rock slide, away from potentially other dangers that were unbeknownst to me. Whether it be some holy spirit or something else, I'm not sure, but I am grateful for it. I am glad that I have survived such perils in one piece. Know this, dear reader, this may be one of the most fraught eras of my climb, is I will most likely be facing danger around every turn, and I must be vigilant. You will hear more from these shortly. Alright, well, welcome back. I apologize for such a long gap between this episode and last, but things got in the way. I also wanted to read far enough ahead in the story so I can better kind of plan out these episodes and figure out exactly what I want to say and what I want to touch on. So, on this second episode of Mount X, of Climbing Mount X, we're going to be discussing the first little bit of the Claremont era, the giant Claremont era. Now, for those of you that maybe didn't watch the last episode or are just tuning in, the X-Men, up until this point, were not really writing new issues. They were mainly reprinting old stories, but just continuing the numbering, as well as the X-Men had kind of split. They had been featured in other offshoots. Iceman and the Angel, I believe, were on the Champions. This is a a team, and I didn't read this, but to give context, this is a team featuring Hercules, the Black Widow, Ghost Rider, Angel, and Iceman, I believe. And I think they're on the West Coast, and they're just, doing superhero stuff, but it seems like it's such a very odd team. The book didn't really take off as probably well as Marvel wanted. I think it lasted maybe like 17 issues, but it seemed really campy, and just kind of a ridiculous jaunt. You also saw, there are other types of books that Marvel did back then, sort of like Amazing Adventure and other things like that. And what's interesting is the X-Men do make cameos in this book, either as a team or sort of as individual characters. One that I do want to mention that I somewhat skipped in the last episode was how Beast actually changed from being a human to more of this beast-like character. And essentially what happens is he is, he has decided that he's going to leave the team. He got this job at this science plant, but he wants to do work as a scientist, wants to discover more about the essence of mutation. He wants to figure out exactly why why does mutation happen? What is mutation? So he is working at this lab now, and interestingly enough, a break-in happens, and he is, he has to stop the break-in, but he's smart, and he goes, wait, if people see me leaving my my dorm or whatever, my apartment, with a me in my Beast costume, everyone's gonna know I'm the Beast. So he has this serum that's sort of this weird science concoction that's supposedly supposed to make mutation become even more enhanced, go even further. So he drinks it, and he changes all furry and spooky looking. He has teeth, claws, fur all over, everything like that. So he goes to try to stop the break-in, and he has a timer. As long as he comes back within 30 minutes, he can revert back to normal. Of course, this doesn't happen. He he completely misses his window. Now he's stuck like that forever. And that's really all there is to note. I was actually expecting it to be more so that he was kind of ashamed that he was immune and was maybe looking to find a cure. There was sort of an undertone of that, but it wasn't really stated. It was more so that it kind of was just him being an idiot and sort of being, I guess, his hubris for science kind of bit him in the butt, and he has to sort of pay for his mistake, I guess. But it was okay. The Beast stories were actually kind of interesting, and one creepy thing though was so to disguise himself, instead of having an image inducer like Nightcrawler has, and we'll get to Nightcrawler in a little bit, he instead goes, okay, I'm gonna break into this costume shop, get a bunch of rubber, latex rubber. I will make a mask of my human face and gloves of my human hands and just wear those. So I just imagine he looks super duper creepy with this rubber face, and no one's just Hank, you look really weird today. But it's very interesting. And Beast goes on to be an Avenger, and Beast is sort of more of a part of something bigger, I suppose, with being an Avenger rather than an X-Man, as well as sort of being more of his own solo act again. And there, it is very interesting. But, so as the comics are coming along, Chris Claremont is introduced to writing the book. And his first, sort of the first stop here is Giant Size X-Men #1. So Marvel is, having this X-Men problem. So to try and boost sales again, to try and get the ball rolling again on X-Men, have people believe in the X-Men again, they, get a writing team together, and they introduce a completely new team of X-Men. Angel, Beast, Jean Grey, Iceman, as well as Havoc and Polaris. They're gone. They're not gone. They've disappeared through the sort of the opening of this issue, and Cyclops is the only member left. He was discussing with Professor Xavier. He was on a mission, and something happened. He can't really remember. His powers were temporarily disabled, but he wants to go back and rescue his team. He wants to go and rescue the X-Men. So this prompts Professor to then go, okay, well, we need a new team for you to lead, so you can rescue the old team. So now we're introduced to a bunch of mainstays to the X-Men comics. These are names that you will see throughout from basically here on. You'll see them a lot, and these are basically, as well as the original 5, but more so these more sort of new X-Men, the all new, all different X-Men, the giant size X-Men, if you will. These will be players that are, front and center for a lot of the stories. So you have Wolverine from Canada, Colossus from the USSR, Nightcrawler from West Germany, Storm from, she was born in Cairo, but then she resided in Africa as somewhat of a storm goddess, really. She was revered as sort of somewhat of a god. And then you have Thunderbird, who is, I believe, Apache. And you have Sunfire, our boy Sunfire, who made an appearance in the original 60-something odd issues of the X-Men, sort of at the tail end, from Japan. So Professor Xavier has gathered these mutants here, and they're like, okay, we need you to go with Cyclops to rescue the old team. We need you to help out your fellow mutants. And what's interesting right off the bat is that this is not like the team before. This is a diverse, culturally, different roster than just a bunch of American teens. And what's also interesting is that this team has never really been on a team before. They have all been solo acts. Wolverine has been a government agent and sort of been playing solo for most of his life. Colossus has lived on a farm. He's a farm boy. Storm has been just sort of, being on her own as well, especially considering her parents died when she was very young. Nightcrawler, sort of a lonely outcast. Thunderbird, also feeling sort of an outcast due to, what has happened to the Native American people. So everyone is just these loners, and Professor Xavier has put them together. This makes the team atmosphere very volatile in the early days of this roster, because everyone kind of wants to do things themselves. No one wants to listen to Cyclops and his leadership. Everyone kind of wants to do things their own way, and everyone is very standoffish. Wolverine especially causes a lot of problems. He's very gruff. He's very aggressive, and he causes a lot of problems. And what's funny about this issue in particular is that Sunfire does the classic, I hate you guys, I'm going home, screw y'all, and then we'll quit the team and then immediately be back on the team. And that's like a staple of his character, and it's really funny. So they go to this island that Cyclops, from the last coordinates from his jet. They go to this island, and they split up, and they look for the team. They finally find the team, and they're sort of in these sort of vines or something. So they try to get them down, and then they realize, I believe it's Jean Grey, and she says like, no, Scott, you made a mistake. This is exactly what it wanted. It wanted you to come back so we could get more. So then the island basically comes to life, and this is Krakoa. And Krakoa is basically like a living island, sort of a mutated living island. And this is probably one of the biggest and most difficult fights to date for the X-Men. They're having to fight this giant island. It can control the surroundings around it. Everyone's having a really hard time fighting it. And things look pretty dire. And the reason why it wanted Cyclops to bring more mutants back is because it fed off of mutant energy. So, it's very, it's a very dire fight. It's very difficult for them, especially with this team that doesn't seem to really want to play ball with each other, as well as maybe the older roster of X-Men. But through the help of Professor Xavier, as well as, the mutants they managed to basically fling Krakoa into space. They just jettison him out of Earth's orbit, and through a miraculous victory, they've won. And so when they go back to the mansion, Professor Xavier's like, "Hey, you guys all did well. I'd really like you to stay." The original X-Men, not so much. They kind of part and go their separate ways. And a couple of the other X-Men, the newer X-Men, Sunfire leaves. Sunfire has nothing. He wants nothing to do with the X-Men at all. He thinks that it's stupid. He's too prideful for such a dumb operation. He wants no part in it. So what we have left is essentially a roster of Cyclops, Colossus, Wolverine, Storm, Nightcrawler, and Thunderbird. And as well as Banshee. Banshee comes along as well. So again, you have this really interesting sort of multicultural roster. Some have a lot of seniority, like Cyclops and Banshee have been working with Professor Xavier for a while. Aurora was very smart. Aurora, to get a bit off topic, Chris Claremont, you can tell he really loves Storm. You can tell she is one of his absolute favorite characters, right? Because she gets a lot of really great lines, a lot of page time, and she's just really cool. And it's really great to see, just see her unfold, because when I first got into X-Men, and I was reading it, sort of haphazardly, skipping back and forth between stories and eras and whatnot, I never really thought that much of Storm. I thought she was an alright character. She was pretty neat. But I was really more focused on characters like, I thought Cyclops was actually kind of interesting. I liked some of the more newer additions to the X-Men. Or I guess newer. I liked Rogue. Rogue was really great. Gambit was cool. Kitty Pryde in sort of her more adult role was great. Emma Frost is someone who I love. So there's a lot of these other characters. But Storm never really stood out to me as one of them. That was just like, oh, I really like this character. But through this, I really like how he writes Storm. And it's just really enjoyable. So with this whole thing, so the team is, assembled. And now this new team is going off on their first mission. And they encounter Dr. Nefaria, or Count Nefaria. And for those that don't know, Count Nefaria is this... I always pegged him to be kind of Eastern European. But that may be wrong. But he's sort of this spooky bad guy who is the head of the Magia, which is basically Marvel's way of getting around the Comic Book Code Authority, because the code said that you couldn't have stories involving the Mafia. So to get around that, they said, oh, we'll just change that F to a G. They're not the Mafia, they're the Magia. It's completely different. And so they go and, Count Nefaria basically takes over this mountain military base in Colorado. And the base is, houses a lot of nuclear weapons and weapon control systems. So if he takes over that mountain, he can basically hold the world hostage. And he does. He has this weird animen sort of, take over the mountain. He has this big speech, oh, I'm gonna, I have control of, America's nuclear arsenal. I can wipe out the planet if you don't give me $1 billion. So, of course, X-Men, being at the X-Men book, Professor goes, hey, you guys should stop him. So they go, and the team, still, of course, fairly young. They're having some problems coordinating themselves. Cyclops is maybe struggling to really lead the team. But they manage to go to the mountain. They're working way through his animen. And they eventually have somewhat of a confrontation with Count Nefaria, but he managed to start to get away. And he does this by getting into a jet, and then, he's taking off. Well, Thunderbird managed to hop onto it and Banshee's also following him. So Thunderbird and Banshee in pursuit. They're trying to get him. And Thunderbird is on the jet, and he's pounding away at this jet. And Banshee's trying to stop him. The jet's getting further and further away because it's a lot faster than Banshee. Banshee's telling him, you gotta just jump off. You're gonna kill yourself. And in this really sort of heartbreaking moment, Thunderbird just doesn't care. He, through sort of his thoughts of what he's talked about, his people were disgraced. He's a mutant. He feels like such an outcast. He has become so disillusioned with life and how things are. He essentially sees no point in going on. So he sacrifices himself and blows up the plane. So basically killing him and supposedly Count Nefaria. And the thing is, like, a lot of X-Men fans know this. They know that this happens. But even as I'm reading this, I felt like really shocked. This is the second issue of your new sort of, reboot on the X-Men, and you've already killed off, like, a roster member. And that hits pretty hard. And this Cyclops takes this really hard because a man died in the field. This is his guy. He's under his watch. And Cyclops lost a man, and this stays with him for a while, and I think that this adds to the frustration of Cyclops trying to control the team. He doesn't want a Thunderbird to be repeated. He doesn't want, to lose another member of his team. Even though he's somewhat standoffish at the time, this is still his unit. He has to ensure their protection and safety. So I think this puts even more onto him the mantle of being a leader, rather than being a more dynamic and interesting character. He has to be the stern leader. Because if not, people under him will die. And it's, that's really tough. So then, what happens next, sort of the next big story, is leading up to the Phoenix. Now, basically what happens is Eric the Red shows up, everyone's favorite, what do you call it? Public domain villain. Because basically anyone can be Eric the Red. As long as you got the costume, you can be Eric the Red. And so basically Eric the Red shows up. He mind controls Havoc and Polaris. And basically they want to kill Charles Xavier. Charles Xavier is, starting to... Oh, excuse me. Professor Xavier is starting to speak out for mutants, and start to really champion this cause of equality and understanding. So the Havoc and Polaris, they get hypnotized by him, and they're trying to kill him. And it's this really crazy scene at the airport, and there's just mayhem. There's explosions, buildings, glass breaking, everyone's trying to fight each other. It's a really crazy scene. And, Cyclops also gets confused when he sees Eric the Red, because he is supposed to be Eric the Red. So who's this new dude? And it's really confusing. So the team, I can't remember exactly how, but the team follows them, and, of course Sentinels are involved. The Sentinels start to get introduced thanks to this rampage at the airport. This gives some government people the push that they need to reintroduce the Sentinels and have them come back and say, like, no, we need this. Mutants are a real problem. So, the X-Men have to deal with Sentinels. They're having to try to figure out, like, what could have caused Havoc and Polaris to just kind of snap. Well, eventually they sort of get kidnapped by Sentinels, and then they are transported to the space station. The title for the arc is called Death Star Rising, which is actually kind of funny because Star Wars or whatever. But they get transported to the space station, and this politician is seemingly behind this whole thing. He hates mutants. He wants mutants eradicated, and so he has the X-Men kind of fight these, like, robotic, automaton versions of themselves. But, he spills his guts, he has this whole plan, But thanks to the ensuing fight and everything, the space station's basically gonna blow up. And he's on the space station. The X-Men managed to get into sort of a shuttle and get out of there, but the shuttle is badly damaged. The space station blows up. The shuttle is going into re-entry, and this is another really poignant moment in early X-Men, and this is something that Claremont has written. And I think it's really interesting to note that for a lot of the X-Men, it's sort of this momentum of just big event after big event after big event, and all this like big stuff is happening. It's really awesome to see, and it's also, you have to feel just how tiring it is for the X-Men. But so the shuttle's coming in, entering the atmosphere, it's breaking up. It could probably explode. The pilot's knocked out, and Jean decides, okay, I'm going to be the one to pilot it. She sends everyone in sort of this radiation-proof hold, or whatever you want to call it, in sort of the back. And she will pilot the plane. Everyone's worried that, like, well, you have no radiation shields, the ship's badly damaged, you could die. And Scott's really worried about this, and he's trying to talk her out of it. But she knocks him out. Everyone else is in sort of the protected part of the ship. The ship starts to break up, crashes into the water, and there's a part before this where you definitely see her die. There's this big engulfing fire. She's probably dead. And everyone sort of resurfaces from the water, and Scott's really broken up. He's freaking out. Jean. But just when you think another X-Men has died, another person Scott is linked with, especially someone like Jean, who he loves more than anything. From the ashes, Jean Grey, shoots up out of the water. Behold, X-Men, I am Phoenix. And that's sort of where we're going to stop. And in the next episode, we'll get into the beginning of the Phoenix Saga. And the Phoenix Saga is really great because from up until now, I think with superheroes, everyone's kind of set at sort of this human-ish power level. Like, even with X-Men, it's nothing too fantastical. It's nothing too world-breaking to where it feels really overwhelming. But with the Phoenix Saga, it is the first time you basically see a character, like a hero, a good guy, that is just like a god, basically. Especially with Jean Grey, who is coming from where she was as being perceptively one of the weakest X-Men. You see her in like the first couple issues, she can lift small objects with her telekinesis, but that's about it. Now she's essentially like a god level entity, and it's actually pretty spectacular, and it blows the X-Men away. Also, in the Phoenix Saga, you see the team really start to come together. They're not fighting as much. They are, becoming more friends and everything. But we will touch on that next time. Thank you for listening as I regale you with my ongoing climb of Mount X. And I hope you tune in for the next episode. So thank you, and goodbye.